Well, free agency has come and gone, basically, and it's kind of a dud, really, Sigmund. We talked about that off the air, so let's
Yeah,
bring that up now here on the Audible, going over some of the latest free agency news because we've known a lot of stuff over the weekend, and the NFL has this stupid tampering period, Sigmund,
right.
and it allows teams to just legally tamper. There's tampering all the time. A lot of teams kept their own free agents. The big stuff happened like a week ago in terms of, oh my God, DK Metcalf to the Steelers and Devontae Adams. Like, yeah, that's old stuff. So, Sigmund, we're not going to talk about the old stuff. We're going to talk about stuff that just recently happened in terms of Wednesday, recording on Thursday, right here to your YouTube on a Thursday as well. So, I think this free agency period has been very lackluster because a lot of this stuff happened before the tampering window was even open.
Yeah, we saw, like you said, the most consequential moves of free agency, the period, were trades. DK Metcalf and Laramie Tunsil. And we saw what, two players franchise tag this year? T. Higgins and Trey Smith. So that was a sign that not that many players got to the end of their contract that other teams would be interested in or otherwise that are very compelling players. We're waiting to hear about this Trey Hendrickson situation, but teams, dare I say it, sees teams are doing a good job locking up their talent before they get to the end of their rookie deal, which with the cap going up 9-10% a year, that's always going to be rewarded. And as always, when players do make it to free agency, you should ask why. You should ask why, with the exception of, say, teams like San Francisco, where they're in a bloodletting year where they're trying to do less with more in the interest of the long term, and also trying to take the pain now for bad decisions in the past. But maybe this just is a sign that teams are doing better at making good decisions, and it means the teams that have money don't have a lot to spend it on.
Yeah, don't have a lot to spend it on and don't have a lot of selection, right? The selections here were a little bit interesting. Plus, when we talk about running backs and tight ends, we're going to start with the tight end and then we're going to talk about running back. Then we're going to wrap up with some quarterback talk. But before we get there, Sigmund, it's also teams staring at the draft going,
Sure.
wait a second, why do I need to do this? Because there is a blank load, sorry, Joe, of running back help and tight end help coming. This is going to be a fantasy football draft like no other.
And defensive tackle help and edge help. And so some positions that are premium positions in terms of what teams are willing to pay. We saw some big contracts handed out to interior pass rushers. Milton Williams got 26 million a year. You're the Patriots, you have money to spend. That's what you're going to spend it on. Dio Odeyingbo got 16 million a year. These are part-time players. These are guys that are playing like 50% of the snaps. So you can see what teams are valuing, and this is a situation where the cost control of rookie contracts also plays in here. So I think teams are holding on to their picks tighter, and they're not looking at the talent that's out there in free agency and finding that very compelling. So, see, like, spoiler alert, we'll talk a little bit about Rico Dowdle coming up, but I think running backs, what are we seeing? 1-year deals. Teams are not willing to commit. So it's not even just will our team stepping up. I guess Aaron Jones got 2 years from the Vikings, but teams aren't making long-term commitments because they can get talent cheap in the draft, and they know that these positions, while fungible, they would rather pay. See, let's just look at the situation of Jordan Mason, for instance, because David Lombardi saying, well, they put a second round RFA tender on Jordan Mason to try to create a trade market for him. You won't give a second round pick by signing him to an offer sheet, but maybe a third or fourth round pick. Well, would you rather have the kind of running back you can get in the third or fourth round for 4 years cost controlled, or 1 year of Jordan Mason?
Yeah, people already know. Teams know, and they know what they want to do. They know what they don't want to do, and they don't want to overspend for positions that, well, they can get in the draft and a lot of thickness there within the draft. So let's answer that doorbell, Bloom, by talking about. Let's start with Rico Dowdle because you mentioned it, and we're kind of on the running back situation anyway. And with Jonathan Brooks, I don't know. Have you ever remembered a back that missed 2 years and then became anything? So we like love his talent, certainly appreciate his game, but now with now upcoming another season to be missed for Jonathan Brooks, Carolina's like, well, Chuba Hubbard's going to have a backfield mate, and that's going to be Rico Dowdle. So an interesting move because Chuba Hubbard's already there. And then, more lamenting over, well, we're probably never going to see what we should have seen with Jonathan Brooks. I can remember guys that missed 1 year, their
Right.
first year, like Ricky Waters didn't play in his first year, and then he was a 10-time 1,000-yard rusher, seems like. So with Brooks, we'll lament that, and then we'll go, all right, Carolina, we see what you're doing again.
Yeah, and it's a good fit. Dowdle played at South Carolina, so he's coming home in a way. It sounds like what happened was the Cowboys go in and sign Javonte Williams, and Williams and Dowdle are different running backs. Williams is going to give you
Dowdle's good.
well, as a runner, yeah. I mean, Williams is going to give you that dependable pass protection and dependable work in the passing game, but he's a kind of running back you would pair up with a rookie running back. Whereas Rico Dowdle, I think he saw himself as a starter going into free agency, and he wanted starter money. And very quickly, he saw it wasn't out there. So, being not quite a 1A, but I do think that this makes you wonder about Chuba Hubbard. We never really got to see Chuba Hubbard. Miles Sanders got released. We never really got to see Chuba Hubbard with a true running mate. And Rico Dowdle was good enough to deserve that kind of role, maybe a 30%, 35%, not a backup role. So it puts a little ding in Chuba Hubbard's value. But overall, I think this is, again, a sign of just how tepid the market's going to be. Even Najee Harris got $5.25 million, the same as Jordan Mason, the same as Jalen Warren got on their second round RFA tenders. $5 million a year. That's borderline starter money. So absolutely, you hear it over and over again, but it's for a good reason. Teams are looking ahead at this running back class. They know what they're going to be able to get. Look, the Steelers could still take a running back. The Chargers could still take a running back. We talked about the Cowboys. They're going to take a running back. This applies to almost every team in the league, that you might look at these running back situations right now at the end of free agency's first wave and know that most of them are probably going to change after the draft.
Yeah, and I would say this for this draft, which is incredibly thick. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt in the 7th could
Mm-hmm.
be a great starter.
Sure.
So I don't think it should change this for anybody. If we're talking running backs and even tight ends, which are still thick, lesser so than the running backs, but not much. Because Fairweather, the Auburn kid, Luke Lachey
Mm-hmm.
in the 5th round, like 6th round, like you're gonna find some value. And for me, it's like, yeah, okay, you got Rico Dowdle, you got Javonte Williams, whatever. You're still getting it back in the draft. And if you didn't get anybody, let's say like the Denver Broncos, you're probably
Mm-hmm.
going to get 2 running backs in this draft because it's that type of draft. I was talking to Chad Ryder when I was out at the scouting combine, Bloom, and Chad said it's not quite a double draft, but it's pretty close. And next year's draft is not great, Bob. So, okay, put a pin in that one. I'm collecting picks for this year, Sigmund, and then I'm letting next year, like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's the problem for players, running backs whose contracts are going to expire next year. Even some of the running backs that we saw come in last year via the draft that didn't get big opportunities. You wonder if they're ever going to get that opportunity now with this new class coming in. So yeah, I think that while we can say this was a ho hum period from a fantasy football perspective of free agency, not a lot of consequential moves. Maybe we're going to make up for that a little bit on the back end in the draft as we see a lot of backfields get shaken up.
See a lot of backfield shaken up, see a tight end position grown and expanded and really, really improved with Evan Ingram going to the Denver Broncos. It is a Broncos show. And let's talk about that because Sean Payton has talked about finding the Joker and that he wants a pass catching running back, an elite receiver at running back or tight end. That's what he said. Well, Evan Ingram's not the seam ripper that he used to be, but he's a middle of the field, get open type of guy that can catch and can move the chains. And certainly that's something they've been looking for. So maybe not, you're not going to remember Jimmy Graham and go, wow, this was a fantastic move, but it's better than Adam Troutman or anything else they've got there.
Yeah, I would say that the fantasy football market before this signing, Ingram was tight end 16, about 140 overall in early underdog drafts. And I think the fantasy football market will overreact and move him up too much. because
Yes.
he's not going to get the target load he got in Jacksonville. And whatever planned Sean Payton has, look, 2 years, 23 million. That's the initial report. Isn't that one of the funny things we always have to do at this time of year, Cease? Is those initial numbers? It's almost never. I think the original report for Najee Harris was 9 million. Actually, no, it was 5.25 million. So we see a lot of these numbers get reduced. Cavante Turpin was another one. That's maybe one of the more underrated moves of free agency for if you're looking for a joker. That would have been somebody. That's one of the things. Cease, and we don't want to turn this into a Bronco show, but we always do. Why not make more use of Marvin Mims? Why not use some of the more dynamic players? Because that's the thing. Evan Ingram is not a dynamic player. Evan Ingram is not a player that you say, well, we just need to get the ball in his hands and let him do his magic. So is it hard to find what Evan Ingram offers at this point in his career? Does he deserve to get paid more than Mike Gesicki got paid? I don't think so, but he did.
Yeah, he did, and here's where we're at. But also the same thing, just like I said earlier, Colson Loveland at 20 still in play. If
Right.
he's on the board,
Right.
Tyler Warren's likely gone. By the way, now with Geno Smith with the Raiders, Ashton Genty at 6 seems most likely.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, that'd be pretty dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, so you're looking at Omarion Hampton for the Broncos at 20. They haven't addressed running back yet. They need to address running back, and even if they pick up Miles Sanders or whoever, like, whatever, you're still getting a back or 2 in this draft. So, yeah, Colson Loveland's still there because you can have a guy that's good for now, and then you can have a guy that's good for the future. And as we know, tight end takes a little time to get going. Unless you draft Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, who was Bo's guy and he plays basketball with Bo. Like, unless you draft that guy, there's going to be kind of an on ramp. There'll be a little bit of an on ramp for Ingram, but you'll take care of that in camp.
Yeah.
There'll be an on ramp for a rookie tight end, even if it is his former teammate Terrence Ferguson.
And if you put all these pieces together that we're talking, Cease, again, ho hum free agency period, not a lot of excitement. Uh, Another aside too, even the big deals are 3-year deals because agents are wising up and saying we want to reset. The cap's going to go up 3 years from now. We want to reset 3 years from now, not 4 years from now or 5 years from now. Or actually, you're even seeing smart teams, resetting before you get to the end of the contract. But you're seeing teams, because it was a ho hum, a lukewarm reception to the players that were out there in free agency this year, don't assume that they're committing to these players or they've solved those positions. Teams are going to double up. They're going to sign somebody and they're going to draft somebody. So I do think you're going to see some temporary, again, overreactions to some of these free agent deals as far as bumps in fantasy value that will be short lived.
Okay, as we wrap up today's show, let's talk about some quarterbacks that are out there. And again, as of this
Right.
recording, things could change. Russell Wilson has met with the Browns. He's just going to meet with the Giants. I believe that's the case. He just needs to hang up his cleats if he's not going to be a backup somewhere. But whatever. Maybe that's a larger conversation. Kirk Cousins is going to stay until they can trade him. I guess we'll see. Aaron Rodgers is floating around out there somewhere. Maybe lands in Pittsburgh, and then Joe Milton. The most interesting one to me,
Sure.
Bloom, is Joe Milton, because the rest of these guys, I'm like, well, Cousins looks washed. Wilson still looks washed. Whatever, he's good enough. Yeah, he gets sacked too much. And Aaron Rodgers looks washed. I'd rather talk about Joe Milton here, but let's talk about them all.
Yeah. We'll start with Rodgers this way, Cease, because you've been adjacent to Rodgers. You haven't covered Rodgers, but you covered a team that was anticipating getting Aaron Rodgers, making
For 2 years.
moves, right? So at that time, he was still not that far removed from an MVP level season. Remember, the year they drafted Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers found his game again. But what I wonder is, I think about relationships. We're always thinking about relationships. The NFL is a league of relationships, right? So you think of a relationship, you're starting a relationship, a romantic relationship, and everybody should understand that in some ways, there's a good Milan Kundera passage about this in one of his books. You can take the first few days of a relationship and the long-term relationship, it's like a fractal. It's just going to be playing that out over and over again on a larger scale. So if you're the Steelers or you're the Giants, and maybe we shouldn't put the Giants in this conversation because the Giants are desperate. Joe Shane and Brian Dable are like 3 steps out on the plank. So they need to keep their job. Um, but do you really want to start a relationship when this is how it's starting? well, I need some time. I think the way I saw it reported, Cease, was the Steelers are giving Aaron Rodgers some space. There's the picture of him walking on the beach contemplatively. It's almost too on the nose. I mean, are we being put on here? But I'm asking you, Cease, is Aaron Rodgers compelling enough to put up with this stuff? Or should the Steelers, like many people at the early part of a relationship, say, wait a second, maybe this is a bad idea?
Well, what does Mike Tomlin want? Does he want to get over 500 again, or does he want to actually flip and win?
Right.
Now the good thing is there's been 3 Steelers coaches our entire lifetime, and Bloom, we're old.
Yeah.
But, like, at the same time, it's like you haven't won a playoff game in whatever the number is, like 6 years, whatever. You haven't been to a Super Bowl since Super Bowl 45. That's 15 years. Isn't that unacceptable? Right? You're the Pittsburgh flipping Steelers, and hey, we got 9 wins, guys. We're
Yeah.
above 500. I don't care, but it seems like that's been enough to satiate or pacify everybody in Steeler Nation. And honestly, it shouldn't be. I'm not saying fire Mike Tomlin. I'm just saying get a real damn quarterback. And if that means sucking this year and then getting Arch Manning next year or whatever, I've seen
The
mocks.
draft is in Pittsburgh.
I've seen, Shadur Sanders kind
Yeah.
of fall to the
Yeah.
Steelers. Shadur is an advanced passer,
Yeah.
and Tomlin would certainly be able to absorb any sort of like, oh, Shadur or whatever, anything, any of the BS that anyone's saying. Eric Galco, our friend, had a very good tweet about his kind of interactions with Shadur, and
Mhm.
he's spot on the money there because there's a lot of BS floating around about Shadur. And yes, he's not a runner. Yeah, oh God, he's arrogant. Oh my God, like this is the Cam Newton thing all over again. Except Shadur's not a runner, but he's an advanced passer. So if I'm Pittsburgh, I know Kenny. Oh my God, he's another Kenny Pickett. No, he's another Chad Pennington or Andy Dalton. Or I
Right.
heard someone at the combine say Swaggy Teddy Bridgewater.
Sure.
I was like, okay,
Sure.
I'll take that. But if you're the
Right.
Steelers, stop, man, Joe. Yeah, I was close.
There it is.
Stop
There it is.
flipping around.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry, Joe. Get it now at footballguys.com. Sorry, Joe, but stop flipping around if you're the Steelers.
Yeah, join our March Madness contest. You can win, some of the prizes are some, gift cards to the Football Guys merchandise store. Get your own Sorry Joe shirt so you can let people know in advance that you might be transgressing some social norms, but that's what the Steelers and the way that they have been content with treading water, has created in the fan base. And then you have Russell Wilson, who, while Aaron Rodgers still thinks of himself as a very coveted and is gonna dictate the terms, Russell Wilson's, can I just play somewhere? Can I start somewhere? Will somebody sign me? Well, Russell Wilson, I think you can see the league, if anything, has gone to the other side, where he's not really Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. Is it going to be that different if you're the Giants, if you're the Steelers, or the Browns? And then you mentioned Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is being polite. Kirk Cousins isn't trying, he's not desperate, but he's also not trying to dictate terms. The interesting thing here is Charles Robinson, and sees Charles Robinson's on that short list of, if it's reported by Charles Robinson, Jay Glazer, then you better believe it's true. He's saying that the Falcons are actually going to keep.
Robinson more so than Jay, but yes.
Right.
And Charles Robinson could never be on the show because he cusses all the time, and
Ah,
it's glorious.
yeah, it is. It is. Well, and this is one of those situations where the Falcons, it sounds like, are going to lock in the $10 million guaranteed roster bonus for next year and probably seek to trade Kirk Cousins or maybe keep him. It's not like Michael Penix has a spotless injury record, and Cousins should be better. So you have these three, and then why not Jameis Winston? I think as a Steelers fan, I'd rather see them sign Jameis Winston. I would rather have seen them sign Marcus Mariota, who it sounds like is very happy with Cliff Kingsbury. I saw someone put out there, I can't remember who, that he'll just go with Cliff Kingsbury to the next head coach opportunity Kingsbury gets, which makes a lot of sense. And I know you also want to talk about Joe Milton. Let's get creative here. You trade for Malik Willis, trade for Hendon Hooker, not another rerun of an Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson kind of season.
Yeah, not that. I'm curious why Mariota didn't go with Chip Kelly.
Well, it sounds like I did some probing because I thought for sure after how well he played, he looked good for Washington
Mhm.
last year.
He did. Yeah.
That somebody would look, he's only like 31, would look at him as the next Darnold Mayfield kind of reclamation project. But what I got back from the Washington people was he loves Cliff Kingsbury and he's happy. and he turned down opportunities maybe for more playing time or a possibility of playing time because he's happy. And see, that's refreshing. That's refreshing. Talk about
Football
things in
player
terms,
being happy.
right,
Wow.
and not necessarily valuing money or potential future money
I'm going to
or
be a starter.
I want respect. How about just I like it here? This is going well. And for that matter, why wouldn't somebody want to stay with Washington with what Adam Peters and Dan Quinn are doing? And I'm going to say the name Adam Peters because if you want to talk about storylines for free agency, maybe the biggest storyline from free agency is that San Francisco is going to have a winter coming unless they really hit on some draft picks and some of the young players are ready for prime time. The number of players that played significant roles for this team during their Super Bowl window that they let go or traded during the last 2 weeks is staggering. And isn't it interesting, Cease, that as soon as Adam Peters leaves the 49ers start to nosedive, and the team he goes to, one of the most shocking and thrilling turnarounds, 1-year turnarounds in NFL history. Adam Peters, get to know the name.
Well, Bloom, can I send chills down 49ers fans' spines?
Please do.
Look at how Denver tumbled after Adam left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Adam
So,
Peters leaves for San Francisco, and the Broncos allow him to go, knowing that he's a fast riser in the scouting community, and Adam is a great dude. And then look at how the Broncos took 9 years to get. They were in Super Bowl 50, and then they weren't back to the playoffs until 2024.
yeah. Yeah.
So San
So,
Francisco, unless you have a Rams like, oh wow, Puka Nakua, unless you're like the Rams, because the Rams were going to do that.
yeah.
And then they're like, wait, we can make another run with these young cats before we got to pay them.
Right. Right. And it's interesting because we'll see, for instance, James Gladstone over there, the wonderkin from the Rams organization that now is running things for the Jags, who saw fit to let Evan Ingram go. So just keep that in mind. But and sometimes the organizations are good enough to develop that guy behind the guy so they don't lose that. And then sometimes you find out, oh, we thought this coach or this front office person was responsible for the success, but when they leave, we see it's actually somebody else that was responsible for the success. I think that's what we're seeing with Adam Peters right now. And, maybe the Javon Kinlaw signing, we'll see. That's a good example, by the way, because the Javon Kinlaw signing, there were some signings this year in free agency, even our good friend Doug Farrar, were panned universally, Javon Kinlaw being one of those. But hey, maybe Dan Quinn can find something that the defensive coordinators couldn't find in Kinlaw in San Francisco. And with the culture and with the direction of that team, doesn't it make sense that most players that go to Washington are going to get the best out of themselves that they've gotten in their career?
All right, that's a wrap for the Audible. He is Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on all the socials at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying, watch the videos that pop up if they pop up. Lord, please let them pop up. Stay tuned and stay frosty.